Misjudged quiet strength can be one of the most dangerous forces in the world because it grows in silence and stays overlooked until the moment it rises. People often mistake stillness for weakness. They see someone who keeps to themselves and assume there is nothing beneath the surface. They look at a woman who maintains a predictable routine, who doesn't make noise, who doesn't stir tension, and they decide she is an easy mark. The neighborhood had done exactly that. They made up their minds long before reality ever had the chance to speak. They built a picture in their heads. She was quiet because she was timid. She kept to herself because she was unsure. She avoided conflict because she couldn't handle it. They never considered the possibility that quiet can also mean capable, focused, and trained to stay in control no matter what. Her strength didn't announce itself. It didn't posture or perform. It settled into everyday life like a shadow on the wall. People saw the shadow, but never looked long enough to understand what cast it. She walked the block with steady steps, not to watch others, but to read her surroundings the way a professional reads a map. She checked her locks at night, not because she was nervous, but because habits built in extreme environments never leave a person. She stayed polite but distant because closeness invites questions she had no interest in answering. Everything she did had a purpose, even if the neighborhood thought it was simply part of her nature. When someone carries real strength, they don't need to advertise it. She never felt the need to correct the stories people told about her. She let them talk. She let them assume. She let every shallow judgment float by because none of it mattered. What mattered was that she remained prepared, that she kept her edge sharp even when life looked soft around the edges. Years of discipline do that to a person. They build a quiet confidence that doesn't rise or fall with what others think. They build a steadiness that stays rooted even when the ground begins to shift. That steadiness is what the neighborhood misread most. They saw calm and called it fragile. She saw calm and called it control. The biggest mistake anyone can make is confusing silence with surrender. Her silence came from observation. She watched more than she spoke. She listened more than she reacted. She noticed details most people never think twice about. Which cars didn't belong on her street, which houses stayed dark longer than usual, which strangers lingered too long near the mailboxes. She picked up patterns naturally, almost unconsciously. Her mind had been trained to treat everything like information, even the things that looked harmless. So when the first unusual signs appeared, she didn't ignore them. She logged them, the way she had been taught. A car idling 2 blocks down. A pair of men walking the same loop twice. A drone that buzzed close to her yard before drifting back into the distance. Nothing screamed danger on its own, but patterns always tell the truth before intentions do. To the outside world, she looked like a woman watering plants and taking out the trash. Inside, her awareness stayed sharp. She stayed ready. She kept her movements measured while her mind ran through possibilities, threats, angles, and exits. There is a strength in being fully present, in refusing to let fear or panic cloud the moment. She had lived through far worse than a suspicious shadow crossing the street. She had been shaped by environments that demanded absolute clarity under pressure. That kind of background doesn't show on the surface unless someone knows what signs to look for. No one in her neighborhood did. What they saw was a peaceful figure with a quiet life. What they didn't see was the discipline behind it. They didn't see the reflexes she kept honed through early morning workouts done before anyone else was awake. They didn't see the self-defense routines she ran through in her yard under the cover of dusk. They didn't see the mental drills she used to stay sharp, the kind that turn reaction into instinct and instinct into survival. They didn't see the calm that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of. They didn't see any of it because they never looked past the surface. Quiet strength is invisible to those who only pay attention to noise. It hides in small movements, in steady breathing, in the kind of posture that doesn't need to threaten in order to be powerful. That strength can sit across from danger without flinching. It can wait for the right moment without showing a hint of tension. It can endure pressure without cracking. She lived every day with that kind of strength tucked beneath her calm exterior, and because no one understood it, they underestimated her. They thought they could press in without resistance. They thought they could push her without consequences. They thought her silence made her vulnerable, when in reality it made her unreadable. And unreadable is the last thing anyone should underestimate when the air starts to shift and the calm begins to tighten around the edges. Threat arrives under the radar when people are too comfortable to notice the early signals. It never shows up with flashing lights or loud warnings. It slips in quietly, testing boundaries, measuring reactions, learning the terrain before it makes its move. That is how it began for her. Nothing dramatic at first, nothing that the average person would point to and say something is wrong. It started with the kind of details most folks overlook because they trust the safety of their routines. That trust is exactly what danger counts on. It waits for people to settle into patterns so predictable that slipping between them becomes effortless. The first sign came in the form of unfamiliar footsteps echoing near her property on a night when the streets usually slept early. Most neighbors turned in by 10, and the ones who didn't rarely drifted far from their own driveways. She noticed the steps because they hesitated in the wrong place. They paused near her fence as if someone was checking for movement. Then they moved on, slow and steady, not rushed, not wandering, but deliberate. She knew the sound of every footstep that belonged on that street. These didn't belong. Yet the moment passed like a ghost brushing by. Anyone else would have dismissed it as nothing more than a late-night walker. She didn't. The second sign arrived in daylight. A car rolled down the street, tinted windows, crawling slow enough to be noticed, but not slow enough to draw suspicion from anyone unfamiliar with tactical surveillance. Neighbors glanced at it and shrugged. She watched the angle of the wheels, the timing of the pauses, the way the vehicle maintained the same speed even when nothing blocked its path. It wasn't lost. It was observing. It passed her house twice before disappearing. No plates she recognized. No driver she could see. Just a quiet sweep of the block that slid into the background the moment it was gone. Threats like this don't come in a rush. They gather. They circle. They test. She could feel the pattern tightening, although it was still early, still subtle, still hidden behind the veneer of normal life. People around her continued living with the comfort of thinking nothing ever happens in their neighborhood. Safety had become a blanket they wrapped themselves in without ever checking for holes. That blindness gave the threat room to grow bold. The third sign showed up in her mailbox. A flyer stuffed halfway in, not folded, not placed with the usual care of postal delivery. The paper had smudges on the edges, as if handled by someone wearing gloves. She didn't touch it at first. Instead, she studied how it sat, how it wedged into the slot at the wrong angle. Mail carriers don't leave pieces like that. Someone else had stepped onto her property. Someone close enough to reach the door, but careful enough not to leave a clear trace. She picked up the flyer using a paper towel and checked it under the light. Nothing written on it, nothing obvious. But she wasn't looking for messages. She was looking for behavior. Someone had tested whether she checked her mail regularly. Someone wanted to know her timing. Most threats are not loud because loud risks exposure. The kind that is planned, the kind that comes with intent, moves like a shadow across a quiet road. She felt the shift in the air before anything obvious happened. People underestimate instinct, but instinct is just experience processing information faster than conscious thought can. She didn't panic. She didn't adjust her routine in a way that would signal awareness. She simply watched more closely. She strengthened her internal maps of exit points, sight lines, and angles around her home. She reviewed the patterns of vehicles in the area so she could identify the ones that didn't belong. She paid attention to the smallest inconsistencies, the ones that stack up until they form a picture too clear to ignore. Threat arrives under the radar because it counts on people being busy, distracted, comfortable, or careless. It counts on them thinking danger looks dramatic. It counts on them believing bad things only happen elsewhere. But she had lived in the kind of world where danger wears normal clothes, drives normal cars, and uses normal days as cover. She knew how it behaves when it wants to stay unseen. She knew how it tests its targets. She knew how it maps a location before making a move. So while the neighborhood slept, while people laughed over dinner and sat in their living rooms with the calm certainty that their world was untouched, she stayed aware. She tracked patterns. She matched details. She noticed the way the same truck passed her street at the same time 3 nights in a row. She noticed the drone that hovered just long enough to skim the tree line before drifting away. She noticed the quiet shift in routine that didn't belong to her, but to the people watching her. Threats that arrive under the radar are never accidents. They come with purpose. They come with preparation. They come expecting a target who won't recognize them until it's too late. What they didn't expect was someone who saw the first signal long before the danger thought it had shown itself. Predators become the hunted when they mistake confidence for control and underestimate the person they are closing in on. It starts as arrogance, the kind that grows when someone thinks they hold the advantage. They believe they can move unseen, choose the moment, secure the outcome. They believe the person they target will react the way most people do when fear starts circling. They expect panic. They expect confusion. They expect a scramble for safety. What they never expect is someone who sees the angles faster than they can build them, someone who stays calm where most would break, someone who evaluates threats the way a seasoned professional reads terrain. That mismatch between expectation and reality is the first crack in any predator's plan. They watched her from a distance, convinced they were closing in on a person who would fold under pressure. They had studied her routine, thinking they were mapping weakness. They saw her quiet lifestyle as a vulnerability they could exploit. They didn't see the layer beneath it, the discipline that never left her bones, the awareness that kept her steps steady and her senses clean. They thought their movements were invisible. They thought their timing was tight. But she had already shifted her mindset from being watched to watching back. She didn't confront them. She didn't warn them. She didn't break pattern in a way that revealed that she knew. She simply began turning the tables in silence. Predators rely on surprise. They need their target unaware. They need the moment of impact to be sharp and sudden. When surprise disappears, so does their edge. She took that from them piece by piece. Every time she noticed a detail they tried to hide, she added it to her internal map. Every time they circled closer, she adjusted her position without letting it show. They thought they were tightening the net. What they were really doing was walking deeper into her range. She started tracking them with the same precision they believed they were using on her. She noted their routes, their timing, the way their vehicles sat on the road, the way their voices carried when they thought the night covered them. She listened for inconsistencies. She watched for the smallest breaks in rhythm. She cataloged their mistakes. Predators often make mistakes when they grow too confident. They assume the situation is simple. They assume their target is predictable. They assume the hunt will end quickly. Those assumptions blinded them to the reality that she was already gathering more information about them than they ever expected to reveal. Shifts in her home routine were subtle but intentional. She kept lights on at odd intervals to test whether they reacted. She stepped outside at unpredictable times just to see who flinched in the dark. She left through the front door, but returned through the side yard to sweep angles they didn't expect her to check. With each move, she gained more control. The predators thought they were watching her. She was watching their reactions. And reaction always exposes intent. When she needed to disappear into the background, she did. When she needed to be visible, she appeared. Her presence became calculated. Her silence became strategy. She learned the cadence of their movements while revealing nothing of her own. This is when the balance began to shift. Predators who fail to read the person in front of them start losing clarity. They start hesitating. They start questioning whether they have misjudged the situation. They start wondering if the target knows more than she shows. Once doubt enters their minds, the hunt begins to turn. She didn't need to chase them. She let their own confidence lead them in. The closer they crept, the more exposed they became. The more they tried to pressure her, the more they revealed about their formation and roles. Who gave orders? Who followed? Who hung back? Who rushed ahead? She learned their hierarchy without hearing a word spoken. She saw the gaps in their coordination. She spotted the impatience in the one who always moved first and the hesitation in the one who lingered near escape routes. Predators may think they are hunters, but hunters are only effective when the prey behaves like prey. She never did. As they circled, she tightened her own assessment. She didn't rely on emotion. She didn't rush. She didn't give in to the instinct most people have to run or hide. She let them build their false sense of control while she built her plan. She calculated every weak point they showed. She followed their tracks with a calm they couldn't read. She used their presence as data, not as fear. Predators lose their advantage the moment the target starts analyzing them with greater precision than they analyze her. They lose more when their movements stop being a threat and start becoming predictable. And they lose completely when they fail to understand that some people don't break under pressure, they sharpen. She sharpened with every step they took. She became more aware, more prepared, more dangerous. They believed they were approaching the moment where their plan would unfold. They didn't realize they were stepping into hers. They didn't understand that the woman they thought they were hunting had already flipped the dynamic. She had shifted from being the observed to becoming the observer. She had turned their pace against them. She had let them reveal their intentions without revealing any of her own. Predators think they control the hunt until they walk past the point where they can turn back. By then it is too late. By then the hunted has already become the one who sees the full battlefield and the one who holds the upper hand. SEAL training flips the script the moment pressure rises because it rewires a person's relationship with stress, fear, and uncertainty. Most people react to threat with adrenaline that scatters their thinking. A SEAL channels that same surge into clarity. That difference is what shifts control from the aggressor to the target. When others freeze, a SEAL assesses. When others panic, a SEAL prioritizes. When others look for a way out, a SEAL looks for the advantage hidden inside the chaos. That mindset is what she carried long after she left active duty, and it surfaced the second she realized she was being hunted. She didn't respond with fear. She responded with training. Her mind broke down the situation into parts: the environment, the threat, the resources, the angles, the timing. She didn't think in general terms. She thought in specifics. Every detail became a data point. How many individuals were involved? How often they circled? What kind of vehicles they used? How they moved when they thought she wasn't looking? She filtered out everything irrelevant until only the essentials remained. That kind of mental discipline is built through years of drills that push a person to stay calm when the body demands panic. She understood that most predators rely on the target's emotional response. They expect shortcuts in judgment. They expect mistakes. They expect the target to make their job easier. SEAL training removes that advantage entirely. She didn't give them a single misstep to exploit. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She didn't move erratically or signal that she felt threatened. She maintained her routine with a precision that kept them guessing. Predictable enough to appear unaware, but controlled enough to maintain full situational awareness. They thought they were reading her. She was guiding what they saw. Her training taught her to use the environment as an ally. Instead of treating her home and neighborhood as a vulnerable space, she treated it like a field to be understood. She measured lines of sight from every angle. She identified blind spots the predators relied on and turned them into traps. She noted the quiet corners where sound carried farther and the ones where footsteps disappeared. She mapped which fences cast shadows long enough to hide movement and which rooftops reflected light that could expose silhouettes. Every inch of the area became part of her strategy, even the details that looked ordinary to everyone else. Control is never loud. It doesn't announce itself. She implemented small changes that shifted the balance without drawing attention. She adjusted the placement of motion lights by an inch here and there. She cleared certain paths in her yard to move silently at night. She tightened loose gate hinges so she could hear them if anyone tried slipping through. She tested the time it took to reach each exit of her home from different rooms. She verified which windows offered the best vantage point and which ones created glare at night. None of it looked unusual from the outside, but each change tilted the advantage further in her direction. SEAL training also taught her how to read people with precision. The predators trying to close in thought their movements were controlled, but to her they were unrefined. She tracked their posture, the way they carried weight on their feet, the pace of their breathing when they lingered in the dark. She saw impatience in the one who shifted his stance every minute. She saw hesitation in the one who kept checking the street behind him. She saw overconfidence in the one who walked closest to her property with his shoulders too loose and his head too high. These details told her more than any conversation could. They revealed roles and weaknesses. They revealed which one made decisions and which one would break first. The hunt they planned relied on her reacting blindly. But she didn't react. She calculated. That single difference changed the entire dynamic. SEAL training teaches a person to move only when movement serves a purpose. She allowed the situation to develop because she knew acting too early would reveal her awareness. She let them believe they were in control while she gathered everything she needed. She shaped the battlefield quietly, the same way she had learned to shape it during operations where one wrong movement could cost lives. Patience became her weapon. Most predators don't have patience. They grow restless when their target doesn't behave as expected. They make mistakes when things don't move fast enough. They start forcing the situation to match their expectations. She waited for exactly that shift. She recognized the moment when their confidence thinned and their frustration began to surface. A car lingered too long. A pair of footsteps got closer than before. A shadow stayed in view instead of slipping away. Those mistakes told her they were reaching the point where they would act soon. SEAL training prepares a person for that moment, not just physically but mentally. It builds the ability to stay steady in the final seconds before a situation breaks open. She didn't tense. She didn't rush. She didn't question her readiness. She centered herself the way she had been taught, bringing her awareness into sharp focus, narrowing her attention to only the elements that mattered. The attackers thought the next move belonged to them. They didn't understand that by reaching this point, they had stepped directly into the range of someone who had been waiting, watching, and preparing with a level of discipline they couldn't match. Strategy over fear becomes the dividing line between those who survive a threat and those who get swallowed by it. Fear is natural. It hits fast, it hits hard, and it tries to convince the mind to act before the situation can be understood. She felt the same surge anyone would feel when danger circled close, but she didn't let it drive her. She put it where it belonged, in the background, while strategy moved to the front. That shift alone changed everything. Fear makes people retreat. Strategy makes them analyze. Fear narrows vision. Strategy widens it. Fear wants escape. Strategy wants control. She approached the situation like a puzzle, not a crisis. The moment she understood someone was targeting her, she didn't jump to conclusions. She didn't assume the worst without verifying patterns. She gathered information with patience. She slowed her breathing. She tracked the timeline of every odd moment. She kept emotion out of her assessment because emotion clouds steps that must be taken with precision. Her experience taught her that fear is loud, but strategy is steady. She chose the steady path every time. Most people fall into predictable reactions when danger grows. Withdraw, panic, confront too soon, or trust instincts that aren't rooted in training. She didn't fall into any of those traps. Strategy told her to maintain her routine outwardly so the predators didn't adjust theirs. It told her to keep her lights on at normal hours, leave her house at normal times, and act unbothered even when she was mapping every inch of the threat around her. She hid her awareness behind a calm that made her look open, unaware, and easy to track. In reality, she was building a blueprint of the danger with a level of detail the predators didn't even have on themselves. Strategy isn't passive. It requires action with intent and timing. She started small. She made tiny shifts inside her home that gave her better control without revealing preparation. She cleared a pathway near the back fence so she could move silently. She reorganized drawers so she could reach what she needed without hesitation. She ran through quiet drills that sharpened her reflexes. She tested her own responses at different times of the day to understand exactly how fast she could move in low light. Fear would have pushed her to barricade the doors and wait. Strategy pushed her to expand her abilities and options. She also studied the predators the way they believed they were studying her. Fear would have kept her inside. Strategy walked her to places where she could observe without being noticed. She watched the way they shifted near their cars. She watched how they communicated in silence. She watched who scanned the area and who stayed still. She learned their timing down to the minute. She learned which one grew impatient as the nights dragged on. Every detail was fuel for her plan. Strategy over fear requires a person to trust their skills instead of their emotions. She trusted her training. She trusted her ability to read a situation quickly. She trusted the hours she had put into mastering control under pressure. Trusting herself allowed her to see the situation clearly. She didn't inflate the threat into something larger than it was. She didn't minimize it either. She sized it correctly and responded accordingly. That ability is rare, and it is why the predators never saw the shift happening. Fear tends to make people reveal themselves. It creates nervous habits, rushed decisions, visible signs that the threat has gotten inside their head. She revealed none of that. Her movements stayed smooth. Her pace stayed steady. She didn't avoid windows or overcheck locks. She didn't linger in corners or jump at sounds. She looked like someone living a normal life. Meanwhile, every second she observed them gave her another angle, another advantage, another piece of leverage. Strategy eventually becomes momentum. The more information she gathered, the more the balance tipped. She knew which predators worked as a pair and which one preferred to hang back. She knew their shadows before she knew their faces. She understood their routes, their habits, their weak points. With each observation, her confidence grew, not from ego but from clarity. Fear had no place in clarity. She didn't seek confrontation for the sake of it. Strategy told her that timing mattered more than action. She waited until the predators slipped from confidence into irritation. She waited until they started moving off pattern because impatience makes people sloppy. She noticed when one of them tried to cut corners and approach her property earlier than usual. She noticed when another stayed behind while the rest moved forward. These cracks told her the threat was no longer stable. And unstable threats are easier to defeat if handled with precision. Fear would have made her rush. Strategy made her wait. She let them step closer, not because she wanted danger, but because she wanted accuracy. She watched them test her yard. She watched them hesitate in the dark. She watched them whisper when they thought no one could hear. She watched every mistake stack into a structure she could use. Strategy over fear shifts the entire battle before a single move is made. She didn't overpower them with strength. She outmaneuvered them with calculation. She didn't react to their presence. She shaped it. She didn't let fear dictate her actions. She let strategy write the path forward. Stand your ground. Finish the fight is more than a phrase. It is a mindset shaped by experience, discipline, and the refusal to be controlled by someone else's intention. For her, it wasn't about bravado. It wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about proving anything. It was about not letting predators decide the rules of engagement. When the moment arrived and the threat stepped out of the shadows with the confidence of someone who believed the outcome was already sealed, she didn't flinch. She didn't give ground. She didn't let them dictate the direction of the encounter. She held steady because standing firm was the only move that kept her in full control. She had spent days watching their patterns, understanding their rhythm, and preparing for the moment when they believed they had the upper hand. They had grown bold enough to close in, convinced she was unaware, convinced they could pressure her into fear. But standing your ground doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from clarity. She knew exactly where each of them positioned themselves. She knew the sound of their boots on the pavement. She recognized the hesitation in their breathing when they realized she wasn't reacting the way they expected. When the lead predator stepped closer, expecting her to step back, she stayed rooted. That simple refusal changed everything. Predators rely on forward momentum. When their target doesn't move, their confidence wavers. She watched the shift in his posture, the small drop in his shoulders, the half-second pause where uncertainty crept into his expression. That pause told her she had already taken control of the moment. Standing still isn't passive. It presses into the mind of the person trying to dominate. It tells them the rules they counted on no longer apply. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a dramatic declaration. She kept her tone calm because calm speaks louder than threat. Every word she spoke was measured, grounding her against their attempts to intimidate. She didn't match their aggression with noise. She matched it with precision. Standing your ground means refusing to be pulled into the emotional chaos the enemy tries to create. They wanted her to panic. They wanted her to stumble. They wanted her to behave like prey. Instead, She held her space with the confidence of someone who knew fear would not help her, but focus would. Finishing the fight doesn't always mean the loudest or most violent outcome. For her, it meant controlling the final phase with the same discipline she had shown through every quiet moment leading to it. She used their mistakes, their impatience, and their assumptions against them. She knew which one lunged first. She knew which one hesitated. She knew who carried weight on the wrong foot, who telegraphed movement with a twitch in the shoulder, who glanced toward escape instead of forward. That knowledge gave her an edge before anyone moved. The moment they committed, she moved with purpose. Every action had intent behind it. She countered not because she wanted to dominate them physically, but because she understood that hesitation would give them control. SEAL training taught her to move efficiently. No wasted effort. No unnecessary force. Her movements were grounded, stable, and precise. She redirected their energy instead of absorbing it. She used their momentum against them. She kept her balance even as they lost theirs. She didn't rely on strength alone. She relied on technique sharpened by years of discipline. Standing your ground is also mental. She didn't let their presence warp her focus. She didn't let the noise of the moment distract her from the details. She read their every movement even as she acted. She tracked angles, distance, and timing. She saw the second one of them realized the plan was falling apart. She saw the fear replacing their confidence. Predators don't handle fear well. They crumble when control slips away. She kept pressing with steady, controlled force, never giving them space to regain their footing. Finishing the fight, for her, meant ending the threat completely, not halfway. She made sure none of them had the chance to regroup. She ensured each one was neutralized with minimal damage to herself. She didn't let adrenaline carry her into recklessness. She didn't take unnecessary risks. She stayed disciplined until the moment the last predator hit the ground and the air shifted from danger to stillness. Even then, she didn't celebrate or relax. She stayed alert, observing, making sure no one else was waiting in the wings. Standing your ground also means accepting responsibility for the outcome. She didn't rely on luck or chance. She relied on preparation. She stood firm because she trusted her training, trusted her instincts, and trusted the plan she had built from the moment she sensed the first sign of danger. She didn't look away from the reality in front of her. She faced it directly because running would have given the predators exactly what they wanted. Finishing the fight meant reclaiming her space, her safety, and her peace. It meant sending a clear message to anyone who believed they could corner her. She didn't step into the role of the hunted. She stepped into the reality of who she had always been, a woman shaped by experience, strengthened by discipline, and unshaken by those who thought they could break her. Standing your ground isn't about refusing to move. It is about refusing to surrender your control, your clarity, or your purpose when the moment arrives.